Many young people exist substantially in the digital world, and this includes a collective that is identified as sort of a young brown male androsphere. And so within this collective, there is sometimes a focus on the construct of feminism. There's no real discussion of feminism in terms of theory, in terms of philosophy, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth wave. What is often discussed pretty much is a parroting of constructs related to feminism and how feminism impacts the young brown males in the androsphere. So there is a feminism obsession. But the issue does not really appear to be about feminism. We're going to talk about what that is. What also is noteworthy is that there is a ratio imbalance with respect to young brown males and young brown females. And so there is a selective advantage because you have a higher number of available young brown females in contrast to the lower number of young brown males. And so therefore there are more females from which to select. And so in a patriarchal dynamic, this is an advantage for the young brown males of the androsphere. However, it's not perceived as such, and instead there is this focus on this feminism dynamic. And so there are a few things that appear to be under the surface that are not actually addressed with respect to the young brown male androsphere. And so we're going to discuss them here. And so what appears to be going on based upon the conversations, based upon the nuance of the rhetoric, is that there is a perception or a reality for the darker males that they are subjugated by lighter males. And this subjugation, real or perceived, adversely impacts their perception of themselves, their perception of their masculinity. And so the response to this is not to direct the energy to the subjugating males, but to direct the energy, sort of divert the energy to young brown females. And so there's a redirection of this anger or this angst in order to resolve the original issue. And for many, it may feel safer to attack the young brown females and this amorphous construct known as feminism. But this strategy is not going to resolve the real or perceived intraspecies predation issue. It's not going to address the real or perceived male on male subjugation dynamic. And as a matter of fact, this strategy of redirecting this animosity towards the weaker vessel that phenotypically resembles the young brown male, it's not going to benefit him in the long run and will have adverse implications in the long run in terms of all sorts of relationships and all sorts of dynamics. Her subjugation will not be the brown male's salvation. It simply will not. And so demanding that a so-called black woman emulate a so-called white woman is synonymous with a so-called black woman demanding that a so-called black man emulate a so-called white man in order to be acceptable as a human. And hopefully you can see the problem with all of that. One might consider in the alternative focusing on one's own social and cultural reality versus trying to be a replica of another human's reality. Just consider whether it might simply be better to invest energy in what already exists and that is desired versus insisting that another person morph into a secondhand version of someone else. And so if someone is coveting, so to speak, so-called white women, for instance, or non-brown females, for instance, then it's probably best to just simply pursue those females versus focusing on the ones that are not doing whatever it is that one would have them do. And so this also applies to lighter males who do not perceive an ability to rise to the level of male on male oppression that they might be perceiving from similarly hued males. And so that's socioeconomic discrepancy there. Might also fuel some similar dynamics. And so some of the things that individuals might want to consider versus focusing on feminism and all of that stuff there is to question the self. And there are a few questions that one might entertain regarding this entire dynamic and all of this angst and animosity. The first question is, why is subjugation of others reviewed as that which is of high value? Why is subjugating other people a valuable thing? You know, if it is seen as a pathological dynamic when one is experiencing it, why would it be beneficial for darker males to emulate lighter males if they perceive that what is going on is pathological? And so if someone denounces something as pathological, but at the same time they covet it, that's something that requires, demands a great deal of introspection to consider why that might be the case and how that would be helpful for the individual. It's also important to keep in mind that men exist with or without a female counterpart. And so instead of obsessing about feminism, one might consider focusing on the self. And instead of focusing on even theories about feminism, one might consider focusing on reading and analyzing writings on men and masculinities. And this would be in lieu of focusing again on women and femininity. And for those of you who are identified as Israelite, Christian, you might want to consider focusing instead of on gynocentrism, focusing instead on God. And I want to leave you with a scripture about this entire dynamic. And this is out of Proverbs 3, starting at 31. And it states, "Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. For the froward is abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous." Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.